This is East Idaho Newsmakers with Nate Eaton.
Thanks for being with us today. We are talking with Damond Watkins. If you are from the area, you probably know him or his family. You have a lot of family members around here. He's our guest today on East Idaho Newsmakers. Thanks for coming in, Damond.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. I mean, you were born and raised here in Idaho Falls.
Yep.
And I'm sure you had a pretty nice childhood being raised here in eastern Idaho.
I did. There's 7 of us kids, and I have an older brother. I fall smack dab in the middle, but my older brother was the shadow that I lived in, and he actually, I think, at one point was on your show.
Yeah, Judge Dane Watkins.
Yeah.
Were you one of those kids that you thought, I want to have my life here forever, or did you want to leave and never come back, or did you know?
I didn't know, although I wanted to be like my older brother. And it's interesting how siblings develop relationships, but he was my mentor. I shadowed him in everything, and I was that little brother that just couldn't get enough time being spent with my older brother. And so I knew that I wanted to do whatever he did. And it took several years of me finding out that, maybe that path that he took wasn't necessarily for me. But no, I had no idea that I'd end up back in the town that I grew up in.
You went to the University of Utah.
Uh-huh.
What high school did you go to?
I graduated from Idaho Falls High School.
Idaho Falls High School.
Yeah.
Went to the University of Utah, and you served a mission.
I did.
Where did you go for your mission?
Vancouver, British Columbia.
Okay. So you go to the U of U, and while you were there, that's kind of where you started developing your interest in politics.
I was involved in my fraternity, Sigma Chi, and I was encouraged to maybe put my name in for a student body president run. And I had no real appetite to do it, but I really enjoyed the mechanics of the campaign. They had a big budget, and I ran as an out-of-stater and was lucky enough to win. But that opened my eyes to kind of the political environment, and I saw the importance, quite frankly, of what some of the things that we were able to do, which sounds kind of weird for a student government, but we had a couple $1 million budget. So it was fun to be able to represent the students at different levels throughout that senior year of college for me. I enjoyed it.
After college, where did your life lead?
After college, I did an internship in the White House with President Clinton. I got to go through the entire grand jury, the indictment, and the impeachment of President Clinton.
What was that like?
It was incredible. It was interesting to see it so up close and personal. I worked in the Office of Domestic Policy, and I felt real pity for President Clinton because there were a lot of things that I thought that he did pretty good at. But the government came to a halt, and that was the difficult part of how much work, how many different things were not getting done because of the issues of some of the things and choices that he'd made.
After the White House, you went to grad school.
I did. I went to Dartmouth College up in New Hampshire, got married, and made my way back to Idaho Falls. Halfway through that program, I wrote a thesis for grad school on challenges family businesses have as they're passed down, and I'd used my father's business as a case study. And so when I completed that dissertation, I transitioned, ironically, over to Melaleuca, where I spent a good chunk of time working for Frank.
So yeah, how did that come about? You are in grad school, and I guess you start sending out resumes, or did it just worked out that you were able to come back here?
I'd on the verge of going out for my graduation at Dartmouth, and I was sending out my resumes with every intention of making my way back east. And a friend of mine, Josh Tolman, had a job in Frank's office, and he was a friend of mine, and I'd known him for a long time, and I ran into him at an event, and he asked me what I was going to do, and I told him I was putting my resumes together and making my way back out to the East Coast. And he said, would you ever consider working at Melaleuca? And that next day, I went to lunch with Frank, and it wasn't a day or two after that I stayed. I took a job, And I had just had my first son, and it just felt right. It made sense, and we camped down here and started our life here in Idaho Falls.
And what did you do for Melaleuca?
I ultimately became the vice president of corporate affairs, but mostly was just the external affairs officer of the company. I worked right in Frank's office, spent many years with him, and consider him to be more, I think, of a father figure than a CEO. And so I really had a good experience at Melaleuca.
What did you learn from him?
Oh, what didn't I learn? I spent a lot of time with him. How to work hard, the mechanics of a business, the importance of maintaining details. It's the small things that matter. The ability to adapt to a changing environment, and then teaching the right principles across the company, I think, is an important piece. But I learned a lot from Frank, and am grateful for those years working with him.
5 years ago, next month, in September, you were in a plane crash. Does it seem like it's been that long?
It does not. It seems like it was yesterday.
And it wasn't one of these plane crashes, overseas. It was here, and you had been in Boise for the day. What were you doing? Do you remember that day? What happened?
I remember everything about that day. I sat representing Frank on a board called Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. It was a business association, and another business in town had gotten that airplane and invited me to go over and avoid the 8-hour day in the car. So we went over, and we were discussing the legislative priorities for the upcoming January session. And on our way home, obviously we had some engine issues, and we made a forced landing in a potato field a couple miles south of the runway. It was a beautiful day. The sun was out, hardly any wind, which was ironic, and I just remember being home, being excited because I was going to be able to get a bike ride in with my older brother, which was kind of a typical practice in the summer months.
The plane goes down here in Idaho Falls, and were you alert? Were you conscious the whole time? Did you go in and out? What was that like?
I remember the master alarm on the airplane going off. I remember looking into the cockpit at the pilot, who was frantically trying to take control of the airplane. I remember looking into the eyes of the passenger across from me, who had a blanket stare on his face. I had remembered looking out and seeing the runway turn into a farm, coming up really, really fast, and thinking that I wasn't ready to die. I grabbed the armrests, I tightened my seatbelt, and we had, I think the NTSB reported just about 4 seconds from the time the engines quit to the time we hit the ground.
Oh. You, in a way though, maybe that would have been better than 4 minutes. I don't know.
It was, yeah.
Just so
10.
you can get it done.
It was horrible. And I wasn't necessarily scared in those 4 minutes or 4 seconds. I was very peaceful and calm, but I was not ready to go. And it was less about it wasn't as much about me as it was about the relationships that I'd had with all of those, people that I knew loved me. Mm-hmm. And that was the last thing, I remember. And so when I woke up, I didn't have the pain at that point. I was trying to process what had just happened, and the very first thought that I had was how grateful I was that I wasn't dead. And I could smell fuel. I could hear the auto ignition on those turbo props trying to ignite. The pilot looked like he was dead. His head was resting on his shoulder, tilted. And I undid my seatbelt, and it was at that moment that I just kind of tipped over. And I had broken my back, although I didn't know it at the time. Mm-hmm. And by the time the door got opened and I was pulled out of the airplane, that's when the pain kind of kicked in, and it was at that point that it was hard to breathe. It was hard to just, that feeling of contentment, everything's going to be okay, was overshadowed with pain.
You were able to stay in East Idaho for all of your recovery, right?
I was.
You didn't have to go to Salt Lake City or Boise.
It was a wonderful blessing. Dr. Greenwald at Ermac was the neurosurgeon that did my surgery, and I'm grateful to his expertise. He was a good, excellent physician.
And how long was your recovery?
Well, it took a year before I was able to get back on my bike. I spent a couple weeks in a rehab facility, but it honestly, 6 months of being laid up and looking at a flight of stairs and wondering, okay, I'm going to go for half of the flight of stairs today, and then thinking that was a good day.
In a way, is the mental worse than the physical?
Without question, yeah. But as I look back, the plane accident was the best thing that happened to me. In the middle of all of the hard, hurtful, painful moments that made up that recovery, also were these moments of incredible time spent with my kids. I've got 4 kids, and my kids would come into my bed at night and they would read books to me, and I would spend hours with my kids, a practice that was hard for me to do before the accident. And so there were blessings that came from some of the hard, hurtful things.
And how are you today, health-wise? I mean, you look okay, and
I like to say I'm a good, solid 60%. And so in terms of, if you're in grad school or college, 60%'s a D.
You're at a D, huh?
So that's not, and it's not so much that it's not a life or death situation. It's just that I had a really active, vibrant, wonderful life before, and I don't have that anymore.
Yeah, you have kind of stopped biking, right?
I ride for different reasons now. Before, if I didn't get a couple 100 miles in a week on my bike, that would bother me. And now I'm lucky to maybe get a couple 100 miles in a given month. I don't love the sport any less. It's just I can't. My abilities changed, and I have to find different reasons now.
Because of the pain. Because you're in pain.
Well, I've got a bunch of hardware in
Yeah.
the middle of my back, and unfortunately, I can't get into some of those.
Yeah.
I can't ride like I used to.
So, you recover from the crash. What you make a life change. You decide to leave your job, and what are you doing now?
Well, I loved everything about my job, but the reality for me coming out of my rehab was essentially I can't operate at that level, and it was hard for me to do that, and so I needed to slow it down and piecemeal some of those things. And the different roles that I had up to that time as husband, father, employee, church member, there's all that civic member, there's all these different things, and I wanted to try to restore equilibrium, if you will, among those things. And so it was important for me to do that, and I couldn't function at the level that I'd set for myself before, and it was too hard to try to get that back, and my life had changed, and so I needed to make a change professionally. And so and I'm just so grateful to so many people here in Idaho Falls that have helped me along the way, personally and professionally, that have given me just that opportunity. The same opportunity that Frank gave me in Melaleuca. There are so many other wonderful families in Idaho Falls that have done the same for me, and I'm just grateful for those opportunities that they've given me.
You're still involved with the state Republican Party. You're the committee man who's serving at the national level, right?
Correct. You got
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Representing Idaho. And then you've also, we reported, I think a year or two ago, that President Trump named you to help with some fellowships,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. The White House Commission on Fellows. I sit as a commissioner on that. There's 13 or 14 commissioners across the country, and we select some of America's best and most bright individuals, and we plant them deep into an agency and give them an experience at a high level reporting to the president. So it's a fun opportunity. I enjoy it.
Would you ever run for office yourself?
No.
Not even locally?
No, I don't think so. I love the mechanics of it. I'd love to help people, but I'm not built to be the guy up front.
You were for student body president.
That was it was a different, it gave me enough of an understanding of what was required, but politics today requires it's a different beast. You know, student body government was kind of a microcosm of the bigger picture of what political landscape is, but to get elected in today's environment is really, really difficult, and I don't have the stomach for it. I want to help people that do, and I'm grateful to have good people that are willing to put their names out on the line, and I want to help those people, but to be the person out front is too big of a lift for me.
So when you look out over your life, I mean, is it just unreal about everything that's happened? You know, how it all has played out?
It has, yeah. I'm so grateful to be here, breathing. I'm grateful to be a father to my kids, and I'm grateful to have had another opportunity to reconnect with my Heavenly Father, obviously, and my family, to really focus on those things that make me a better person. And that's an understanding, I think, that all of us and everybody has their own individual, I think at some point, plane crash. But those opportunities can be used for good. And I think that's been a very positive thing for me.
And hopefully it doesn't take a plane crash for the rest of us to realize what's important. Damond Watkins has been our guest today. Thanks for coming in, Damond. Thank you for watching. Have a good week.